Funding for this edition of Remember Them with Steve Adubato and Jacqui Tricarico has been provided by PSE&G, committed to providing safe, reliable energy now and in the future. NJM Insurance Group, serving New Jersey's drivers, homeowners, and business owners for more than 100 years. RWJ Barnabas Health, the New Jersey Education Association. Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, here when you need us most, now and always. Prudential Financial. New Jersey Institute of Technology, NJIT, makes industry-ready professionals in all STEM fields. And by the Russell Berry Foundation, making a difference. Promotional support provided by New Jersey Globe. And by New Jersey Monthly, the magazine of the Garden State, available at newsstands.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Adubato. That is Jacqui Tricarico. And this is a great series called Remember Them, Gone But Not Forgotten. Hey, Jacqui, why don't we line up the show today, which is two extraordinary historians all about the city of Newark, Brick City, where I'm born and raised, and a lot of other people are connected to Newark, the largest, most populated city in New Jersey. Talk about who we have today.
Yep. So first up, we have Dr. Timothy Price that you interviewed back in 2016. He is with the Newark Public Library, and he talks about Charles Cummings, which is a fascinating person out of Newark who started working at the Newark Public Library in 1963, Steve. And he was there for so many different things, so many historical events that happened in Newark, and he just knew everything about the city. And so many people walked into those doors at the Newark Public Library, I know, including yourself, to receive some guidance from Charles Cummings for all different types of things, from if you're going to school and you're doing some reports about the city of Newark, people just wanting to learn more, to famous authors who were seeking his guidance as well.
You know, it's interesting, as a kid growing up in Newark, the Newark Library, the Newark Museum, they're big parts of our world. And for Charles Cummings, he was the go-to guy. It was called the New Jersey Reference Room back in the day. Now it's actually named after Charles. Jacqui, the official name, if you can get it, what is it?
Official name is, hold on, Steve, I don't want to mispronounce it. It is the Newark Public Library's Charles F. Cummings New Jersey Information Center. A little bit of a mouthful, but it's worth
Jacqui,
it.
Back in the day, as I said, New Jersey Reference Room, everything about New Jersey, everything about Newark. I remember doing so many term papers while a student at Rutgers and in high school, back in Essex Catholic High School in Newark. That was the place to go. And you always would see other kids, students from Newark in that reference room. Charles was helpful to everyone. Now, ironically, he came from the South, not born and raised in Newark, comes from the South, has a great appreciation for the city of Newark, and is a kind of historian that not only help people understand the history of the city and the history of New Jersey, but help them appreciate it, right?
Right. And in this interview you did with Dr. Timothy Price in 2016, that was an interview that you did to honor the 350th anniversary of Newark, the city of Newark. And what they did then, and which still exists now if you go on the Newark Public Library's website, is they took Charles Cummings' articles that he wrote for the Star Ledger over years in a span of many years, and put them into one resource that you can access online to read about all those articles that he wrote and learn more about Newark.
Yeah, it was actually, the series was called, in the Star Ledger, when the Ledger was the Ledger, pre-NJ.com, was called Knowing Newark. Charles wrote those. So this interview is with Tim Price talking about Charles Cummings. Charles passed away in December 2005, an extraordinary historian who made a difference. And we must, Jacqui and I, along with you, remember him, remember all of them. We are pleased to be joined by Dr. Timothy J. Price, president of the Board of Trustees at an extraordinary institution, the Newark Public Library. Good to see you, Tim.
It's good to be here, Steve.
Newark Public Library, how important is this great place in connection with this great city celebrating its 350th anniversary?
You know, Steve, it's an anchor institution. We have our main library downtown, but 7 branches through the community. We've been here for more than 125 years, and we're still serving Newarkers in the same way we've done through that entire time. You know, over 1,000 Newarkers come in every week looking for help to find a job. Over 10,000 visit the main library and the branches every week. And we do have these terrific resources to help Newarkers make their lives better.
Let's make sure we're going to put up the Newark Public Library information. But I want to talk about this. This is an extraordinary publication. It's called Knowing Newark, Selected Star Ledger Columns by Charles F. Cummings. For those who don't know Charles Cummings, we could say he was the Newark historian, but that doesn't even do justice to who Charles was. There he is. We're looking at Charles' picture right there. So, for those of us who were in school at Rutgers University, couldn't get through without Charles Cummings, helped us through so many graduate term papers, essays, whatever it was. You go into the New Jersey reference rooms, it was Charles Cummings. He was an extraordinary guy. He wrote a Star Ledger column for many, many years on the history of Newark.
That's right, called Knowing Newark for 10 years. Over 500 columns.
Describe why Charles was so special.
Charles knew Newark, he collected the stories, and he wanted to tell the stories, and he helped everybody. He helped you as a student. He helped Philip Roth when he was writing his novels. And Philip Roth called him a great hero, and in a quiet way he was. He worked in the library for more than 40 years, always in the New Jersey room, always learning more about Newark's history, always helping people discover it for themselves.
Why put these columns together?
Well, with the 350th anniversary of Newark, we wanted to do several things at the library to help the city celebrate. We put on an exhibit that's still up that records the history of the city. We've hosted Guy Sterling's monthly conversations with leading Newarkers. But we wanted to do something lasting, something that people could turn to after this celebration year. And we thought, what better way than bringing a selection of Charles's Star Ledger columns about the history of Newark to the public and giving it away for free.
By the way, you had a couple of I have a couple of my favorites. A couple of favorites of Charles. His columns, go ahead.
Well, he wrote about so many different things. But one that I really like is about the Passaic River. And it got so polluted, we all turned our backs on it. But Charles understood the importance of telling the stories to remember how important the river was in the history of Newark. There were regattas, there were ferries going back and forth, there were people fishing, and it served to support the industry of Newark. And when it got so polluted toward the beginning of the 20th century, we ignored it. But it's coming back now.
Right.
And to tell those stories helps to inform the future, helps to inform the development of the Newark Riverfront Park all along the Passaic.
There's a connection that I feel to this city that is deep and is personal, and you know it very well. And it's connected to my dad in many ways. And Charles and my dad had a connection, and you and my dad had a connection. Here's my point. For those of us who are truly connected on a personal level to this city, is it hard for us to explain to other folks what we feel?
You know,
or am I making too much of that?
Well, those of us who love this city feel that there's a there. And Gertrude Stein famously said about Oakland, there's no there. I have always felt that there's a there here in Newark. Yeah. And one of the reasons is there's 350 years of history. What happened in Newark informed what happened all over the country, from the New England settlement of Puritans through the Industrial Revolution, the vast migration of people from different countries in Europe, later the Great Migration from the south of blacks, more recently the different Hispanic groups. Newark has always been a place of hope, a place to build your future. And we've had our hard times. Charles collected all the stories, not only about the good times, but the hard times.
Sure did.
And You know, in his 500 columns, I calculated recently, he wrote more than 1 million words about the history of Newark. And we're going to put all of them up on a website. In addition to this publication, we have a Knowing Newark website. The first 100 columns are up there, and we're gradually editing them all. And there will be over 500 columns that capture all these stories about Newark.
Let me ask you this. What do you think Charles, who was in that library for 40 years, loved it, loved this city in a way that no one else ever could, what do you think he would think about the future of the city as we move toward the back end of 2016?
Charles was always hopeful. He always wanted to see the best in the city and the best in the people of the city. And I think he would see things coming together in a special way. With the developments around Military Park, the murals around the city, the work of our current mayor, good things are happening, and I think he would look to find ways for the library to be in the middle of that and to encourage that continuing development.
Is that what you say?
I do. And you know, Steve, I've been here for 37 years. I showed up at your father's North Ward Center in a blue blazer and khaki trousers as an unusual person, and he said,
You mean by an unusual person, not someone from the city who was well-educated from the suburbs and went to a good school. That's what you mean.
Well, and he said, let me rent you an apartment, and he did. And that's what the sort of place Newark is. Invite people in and make it your home.
You can't replicate or duplicate that history. And I thank God that Dr. Timothy J. Christ is the president of the Board of Trustees of an extraordinary organization, a great organization called the Newark very public library. Go check it out. And this book is called Knowing Newark, selected Star Ledger columns by the iconic, the late Charles F. Cummings. Thank you, my friend. Wow, Jackie, that taught us a lot about Charles Cummings, but we're going to shift gears to another historian. Based in Rutgers, Newark, Dr. Clement Price, Newark historian, New Jersey historian, Rutgers professor of history, again, came to Newark after the rebellion/riots of 1967, the summer of 67. This interview was done, when, Jackie? When did I do this with Clem?
In 2014, it was actually in July 2014 at NJIT when we were doing some of our interviews out of the great NJIT in Newark. And he unfortunately passed away just a few months later in November.
Yeah, you know what's crazy about this, Clem? And again, check out a documentary. We did a half-hour special. I think it was called If Not for Clem. And our colleague Joanna Gagas, who was with us at the time, now with NJ Spotlight News, did it. She interviewed all kinds of people. If it were not for Clem, if it were not for Clem Price, people would not know about Newark. He used to take people on tours and these bus rides all around the city through Branchbrook Park, a park that I grew up in, to see all the historical sites in the city. If not for Clem, people would not come together. Race has always been a problem in this country, probably will always be. Clem Price, if it were not for Clem, people of different races, different ethnic, religious backgrounds would come together. Clem led an institute at Rutgers where all different people would come together and talk and try to understand each other. How important would that be today? And when you see Clem, you'll see why he was so important. Jackie, what was your takeaway from this?
Right. And something else about Dr. Clement Price is that he was just a lover of music. He was in a glee club. He was a lover of the arts, and that translated into Newark as well. I mean, he had his hand in the creation of NJ PAC and so many others. He, did a lot of things with the Newark Museum. So he contributed in so many different ways in the city of Newark. And, he became the Newark historian after the passing of Charles Cummings. And something that he said when that happened, he did say that Charles treated me as if I was John Hope Franklin. Succeeding Charles is a great honor. And I know that you could just hear that, see that from him. He was so honored to be so ingrained in the city of Newark, and he took such great pride in it.
And finally, as Jackie and I go to this clip as part of the Remember Them series about Dr. Clem Price from an interview I did with him in July of 2014, just a few months before he passed. Clem was a mentor to me, for me. He was a mentor to so many. If it were not for Clem, so many of us who have been able to do anything meaningful in whatever arena we're in would not have been able to do that. Clem was a mentor and a friend to so many. The great, late Dr. Clement Price.
I want to introduce a good friend and someone who's been a mentor to so many of us. He's Dr. Clement Price, Board of Governors, Distinguished Service Professor, Rutgers University in Newark, who heads up an operation at Rutgers Newark. The official name of the center is?
The Institute on Ethnicity, Culture, and the Modern Experience, Steve.
A center not to be confused with an institute, which is
That's
even
right.
more prestigious.
There you go.
Clem, you know, and I mean that, and you know that for a lot of us, you've been a mentor, you've been there for so many of us. When I came up with this idea with Dr. Joel Bloom of doing this, I called you and I said, Clem, what do you think? And you said, let's do this.
Absolutely.
Why is Newark at a crossroads, and what is that crossroads about?
Well, periodically, Newark faces a crossroads, usually having to do with two things: demographic shifts and the perception of the city. And I think we are in the midst of both. Newark is becoming a browner city. It's becoming a more immigrant city. And the tales of woe that used to so much haunt Newark, the perception that Newark was dead, a failed city, that there was nothing really to do here, I think that is now a part of our contemporary past. Most people see Newark as a struggling but very complicated survival of a surviving city, not unlike some of the other, we call them now legacy cities. Who would have thought, 20, 25 years ago, that Brooklyn would be the place one wants to live in the five boroughs of New York? Who would have thought that Cleveland would reinvent itself as this really kind of hip, Midwestern town? And I think Newark is going through the same thing.
By the way, for those of you who do not know, Dr. Clem Price is not only the historian for the city of Newark, he's one of the greatest historians in this country and understands perspective on these issues better than most. Question. I've asked several people this, but your perspective on it's really important. 1967 rebellion, riots in Newark. This many years later, I'm not going to ask whether we've ever recovered. That's not the question I'm curious about. What is the enduring impact of those riots, even today, with all the positive things you just talked about?
The most enduring impact of the riots is that we now study the riots. They're not an aberration anymore. There's been nearly a generation of scholarship, some of it focusing on Newark, that raises this question: what happened to urban America in the 4 or 5 decades after the end of World War II? When you raise that question with respect to Newark, and it's been raised now for 30 years, and the answers are becoming prescient in the scholarship. Most scholars know that Newark's decline begins in the 1930s and accelerates in the 1950s and 60s. We didn't really know that, say in 1965, 66, 67. In fact, when Newark celebrated its 300th anniversary, we were about to celebrate the 350th, you never had a sense that the city was in trouble. But now we know that trouble is threaded throughout Newark's DNA, and the city has always, pushed back and fought on and survived.
We've always, if you read Bob Curvin's book, and you know it well, and we have Bob Curvin in the series, or Junius Williams, who is part of the series as well. A lot of those books and others who write about Newark, a lot of looking for a savior. The next mayor of Newark is going to be a savior. Cory Booker is going to be a savior. Sharp James was a savior. In 1970, Ken Gibson is elected after a corrupt mayor. Hugh Adenizio goes to jail because he's all mobbed up and et cetera. Is that the wrong thing to be? And now Ras Baraka is the mayor of this city. Looking for a savior. Bad strategy?
Terrible vision. What saves cities is a sense of civic fellowship.
So hold on, people ask the question, can Ras Baraka turn it around? That's not even the right question.
That's not the right question.
Go ahead.
Why would we put Newark's foundational turnaround on one man or one woman's shoulder? So I think that what needs to happen, and you see some of this in Baraka's rhetoric during the campaign: when I become mayor, we become mayor. And I think what Ras was doing, and I think he did it successfully, certainly was elected, is begin to spread the responsibility for what becomes of Newark. So I think we may be entering an era in which people will reconnect to Newark, people who are in Newark reconnecting to their city, and people who left this city 40, 50 years ago, finding some spiritual way to identify with the city. When Newark turns 350 years old in 2016, we hope to use that occasion to interrogate the history of the city, to celebrate those things that should be celebrated, and to acknowledge the work yet to be done. And if we can do that, we will have shown not only ourselves, but the nation, that 100 years after Newark became 250, the city is now a mature part of the urban metropolis.
The superintendent of the Newark Public Schools, Cammie Anderson, put there by the state of New Jersey, by Governor Chris Christie, will be part of this series. You know the public school system very well.
Yeah, and I know Cammie very well.
How much of the success or the future of the city as we are at a crossroads is going to be dependent upon the success of those? I used to say 50,000 kids in the public school system. It's not that number anymore.
Right.
It's significantly less than that. How much of it depends upon the success of Cammie Anderson and those who are running the Newark Public Schools?
Again, I wouldn't put too much on Cammie Anderson's considerable shoulders.
Well, we keep doing that. We keep saying, how did that superintendent do?
Well, that's just...
Is that a setup?
That's poor visioning, and it might be a setup. Cammie Anderson has perhaps the toughest job in Newark, and she is going to have to rely on people like you and me, let's call ourselves civic stewards, to provide some space and many opportunities for her to succeed. The demonizing of Cammie Anderson is something that doesn't speak very well of the city.
Listen, we're not getting too inside here, folks, because this isn't just about Newark. It's about folks who try to change things. I want to ask you something. You've never held back talking about race or anything else. Cammie Anderson's white. She is from New York City, from Harlem. She comes in from the state, and she proceeds to propose change. Now, forget about what the particulars of the change may be. But let's assume for a moment that she wants to improve the lives of the students of 37, 35,000, whatever it is, public school kids in the city. Do you believe that some of a significant degree of the opposition that she has gotten for trying to do that, close some schools, let some teachers go who didn't think they were doing a good job, whatever, consolidate, is a product of her being white and an outsider from the city? Some of it.
We've talked about race as long as we've known each other, more than half a lifetime, Steve. Race is always a proxy in Newark.
Is it always there?
It is always in the room. And I think with respect to Cammie Anderson, the fact that she's perceived of as a white person, the fact that she's a white woman perceived of solely on those terms, may have made it very difficult for her to get things done. I was the chair of a task force that recommended Cammie Anderson to the governor, to the mayor, and to the Commissioner of Education, at that time, Chris Cerf. The reason why my colleagues and I made that recommendation, it was clear to us over the course of the 3, 4, 5 months that we gathered and interviewed Cammie and among other candidates, that she was more than white. In other words,
white?
Yeah, in other words, whiteness, not unlike blackness, can be an essentialist way of saying someone is only white. And I would say that Cammie is more than white. She is a talented, tough-minded, intellectually gifted, and daring educational leader. Such people, whether they're white or black, are oftentimes run out of town. I mean, I think the average tenure of urban superintendent, 2 or 3 years. So her whiteness might be a stumbling block, but it should not be the primary stumbling block. How does she interact with parents? Do the kids admire her? How has she faced up to Newark's almost obsessive suspicion of outsiders? For God's sakes, Steve, I'm an outsider. I'm from Washington, D.C.
But you were accepted.
I was probably accepted because the outsider-insider dynamic wasn't as much in play when I came to Newark in 1968 as it became, during that long 20-year period when Newark was declining. A lot of that decline was blamed on outside interests. I was already here. I was already committed to not only working here, but moving here and studying this place.
Where do we go from here to take advantage of our location, the airport? We're going to be talking to the head of United Airlines. Where do we go given the fact the NJ PAC is doing well, that Prudential is here, Panasonic is here, downtown's happening, right, Clem?
Right.
How do we parlay this?
Where do we go from here? And I'm glad that you'll speak to Bob. For the longest time, Bob Curvin, Bob Curvin has said things are actually in place in Newark. We just have to connect the dots. And I'll leave this one thought with you. How is it that a city that has more university and college students than any other city in New Jersey doesn't feel like a college town, doesn't take advantage of the assets of having a university, 2, 3 universities.
NJIT, Rutgers, Seton Hall, Berkeley,
that's right.
Essex County College.
You go on and on. You go on and on. You can pick your sector: higher education, the arts, the humanities, architecture. I mean, I hope you have walked through Military Park.
Oh my God, we're Dan Biederman just here. So we don't feel enough like a college town?
No.
What would it take?
More college students on the streets of Newark. More college students making their way across Broad Street to go to NJ PAC. More college and university students visiting the glorious galleries of the Newark Public Library. More college students putting down a civic investment in the city. In other words, this city has been enormously good to me. And whatever little I can do to repay the investment the city made in me, I see it as my privilege and my duty as a resident of this town.
But you know, you take people on tours all the time around the city. It's always fascinating. People say, they say, Clement Price took me on a tour, and I say, where did he take you? You take people through Branchbrook Park.
Sure.
You take people up in my old neighborhood, and
Sure.
I like to call it Forest Hill, but we never actually lived in Forest. Forest Hill is the richer section of the North Ward, where I actually lived in the North Ward. Take them up there, you take them a week, you take them all over the city. Are they mostly suburbanites?
I would say yes.
What's the reaction?
To be blunt, oh my, I had no idea this city had so many assets. And let me just mention one thing about those tours. The part of the tour that I'm getting the most out of, and in many ways it's theater. If it's a minibus or a manageable number of people, we get off the bus, we walk across, what would that be? West Market.
Yes.
And we sit with President Lincoln, the Gutzon Borglum statue. People who used to bring kids would...
You sit on Lincoln's knee.
You sit next to the president.
Sit on Lincoln's knee.
That was one of those Newark civic rituals. And we don't do it anymore. I do it because I think when you can show someone the power of art, or as you just put it so well, when you can look east and see how Newark rises up from the Passaic River, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So that's just one of the assets that the city has, and it needs to deploy that asset in its schools and its churches in the way we look at ourselves in the 21st century.
Dr. Clement Price, I was very glad that you took my call several months back.
Always.
And I said, Clem, you think we should do this? Joel Bloom thinks we should do it. And he said, who should we get together? And he gave us some great names. And I'm so glad you found the time to be with us, because it would not be complete without you.
Thank you,
Newark
Steve.
is at a crossroads, and I'm glad you're with us.
You bet.
To watch more Remember Them with Steve Adubato and Jacqui Tricarico, find us online and follow us on social media. Remember Them with Steve Adubato and Jacqui Tricarico has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by PSC&G, NJM Insurance Group, RWJ Barnabas Health, the New Jersey Education Association, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, Prudential Financial, New Jersey Institute of Technology, and by the Russell Berry Foundation. Promotional support provided by New Jersey Globe and by New Jersey Monthly.
Every day, nearly 2 million customers across New Jersey rely on PSC&G to provide natural gas. And every day, PSC&G is committed to doing it safely. That includes making sure you know what to do if you smell gas. A natural gas leak smells like rotten eggs. If you suspect a gas leak, leave your home immediately. Get far away, then call 911. Remember, smell, leave, call. Protect the ones you love. Learn more at pscg.com/gas safety.